Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday market snapshot for the Ottawa real estate market for Monday, March 11th, 2024. My name is Annalie Rice. I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario, and every week I bring you the details of what's going on in the Ottawa real estate market. Let's go. Okay, so first off, let's look citywide, and we see that the number of active listings across the city jumped quite significantly this week. It was up by 120. Most notably, that's in the detached market. Most of them are in that market. And then the sales were also up this week, up by 25 over last week. Okay, so when we look at the inventory breakdown in chart form, we can really see visually how it looks. So we can see that the active listings, that's the green line, is climbing quite rapidly, and we have not only broken through that 1,500, but we're well above the 1,600 mark. If you look back to last year, it was June when we had that much inventory on the market, and if you compare the sales at that point, they had been climbing and higher throughout the spring. And then it was the Bank of Canada making interest rate hikes in June and July that made the sales drop off. And that was when the inventory really started to climb in sort of late May into June. So we're definitely off to a busier spring than what we saw last year. Inventory being higher, sales are already higher than what we were seeing last year. When we look at the actual numbers for sales and conditional sales this week, the number of sales was slightly higher than what the number of conditional sales are this week. So I do expect probably next week we're going to see a bit of a drop in the number of sales and probably conditional sales as well, because most of the schools are on March break this week. Okay, so new listing breakdown. This we see again, you can see the very quick rise on the number of new listings. There were 439 properties listed this week. It's another step up from what we had last week. 71 of those properties, which was 16%, were relisted properties, and 368, which is 84%, were new to the market this week. I do expect, as I mentioned on the last slide, I do expect that this number will drop this week because everybody's on March break, and then the sales will be potentially a little bit lower the week following. There's usually a blip for March break. Okay, so when we look at the actual sales this week, we had 22% of those properties that sold this week sold with no conditions. So that's up slightly from the last few weeks. The average for the last 4 weeks sits at 17. What did change fairly significantly was the number of properties selling at or above asking price. So 39.5% of the properties that sold this week sold at or above their asking price. And so that number is climbing. We had 18% of the sales this week were ones that had sold within 7 days of hitting the market. And when we look at just those properties that had sold within those 7 days, we had 50% of those selling with no conditions, and 86% of them selling at or above the asking price. The last thing I have is 63% of the properties that sold this last week were ones that have been on the market for 30 days or less. And that percentage remains pretty steady over the last few weeks. Okay, let's zoom in to see the different areas of the city. First off, we've got the central urban region. We see that the number of active listings in this area didn't actually climb that much, slight increase for detached and condos. And the number of sales also are up across the board, but most notably in the detached and condos. Okay, so when we look at Canada and Stittsville, we see that the number of active listings climbed across property types, and the number of sales was very flat or slightly down from last week. In Barrhaven, Riverside South, what a jump in the number of detached homes on the market. So finally some new properties on the market there. Slight drop for towns and slight increase for condos. And the number of sales were up for detached as well and condos, but down slightly for towns. So it's pretty slow and low inventory of townhomes in Barrhaven, Riverside South. And in Orleans, we had another huge jump in the number of active listings for detached, also an increase for townhomes, and even a little bit for condos there. Sales were down for detached, and then they were up slightly for towns and condos. Okay, so when we look in chart form, when you look at them all together, you can see that the citywide average sale price for detached homes was over $1 million this week. And so I looked into the details of that. So though out of the 95 sales that happened this last week, 25 of them, so just a little bit over 25%, sold for over $1 million. So typically there would be homes that sell for over $1 million, but of those 25 of them, 5 of them sold for over $2 million, and one was in just over $4.25 million. So those sales definitely pulled up the average sale price across the city. But you notice that it didn't really translate into the different areas of the city because most of these sales were actually outside of those zones that I provide the more detailed data on. And here we have the details for townhomes across the city. And, despite, there haven't been that many sales and the prices aren't climbing there, their average townhome is selling a lot quicker than other property types across the city. And here we have the condos. And we have the Canada-Stittsville one there, has a little bit of a blip in their numbers because the properties, there was 5 condos that sold and 2 of them had very, very long times on the market. I looked at those and one of them was a new build condo and had been on for like 400 days. So that definitely pulled up the average for the days on market for Canada. Okay, so this week I finally did get the stats for I call them the board stats, although they're not what the board releases. They're board level stats from my brokerage. For February, I got them on Friday. So here are the details from that. Okay, so the February monthly stats for across the board were 1,008 units sold. And you can see that the number of sales is up significantly. So up 20% for residential and 10% for condos for the month of February compared to February of 2023. Sales price is pretty flat for residential and up 4.5% for condos. If we look at year-to-date stats, again, we're sitting like up between 15 and 20% for the number of sales that are happening so far in 2024 compared to 2023. And the sales prices are a little bit more flat, but up slightly from 2023. Okay, so that's the update for this week. Fairly quick and really just the weekly stats plus those slides from the board level. I will be releasing that extra video on stats and how things compare and why the numbers are so different. I was waiting for those board level stats and they came on Friday and I just haven't had a chance to finalize the slides on it. So I will release that in the next day or two. So if you've been waiting for that, I'm sorry for the delays. I hope that you have a great week. And if you're on March break, I hope you're getting up to some nice fun adventures. I'll see you next week.